So, final thing I want to do, and this is going to be a challenge, so I'm going to speed up, is to look at some ideas around governing and managing your emotional energy. So, the first thing is I want to give you a map of your emotional states, because it's not always as easy and self-evident to understand where we are from an emotional point of view as you might think. So here they are. We have, at this side here, we have positive emotions, we have negative. We have high quantity of energy, we have low. So we have 4 quadrants. Over here, this is the performance pulse between expending energy. This is where we truly perform at our best. This is the emotional state in which you, me, everybody is truly at their best, the performance zone. This is where your clients need to be with you. But of course, you can't always be there, can you? You'd be insufferable if you walked around in that state all the time. So, you have to balance it with being in a low positive emotional state. That would be the optimum. But of course, that's not life, is it? Life suggests that we sometimes spend a considerable amount of time in something called the survival zone. What do those 2 sets of words suggest to you? What could they be described as, those emotions? Fight or flight, yeah. So we have, all of these different zones actually have a purpose. And what these have, these are our basic instinctive survival technique. This, we didn't have big claws and teeth to protect us, so we lived on our wits. And this was the mechanism that allowed us to survive. And of course, the biggest characteristic around this is instant reactive behavior. But are we thinking when this happens? No, of course not. If I step out in front of the road and there's a truck about to do I want to be in the performance zone thinking I can outrun it? Or do I want to be in the, it's a German truck, I think, it's good quality brakes, I think he'd be fine, and there I'm dead. I do not need to think, do I? I need to move with lightning speed. And the best way of doing that is to put me on automatic and, just hijack my body. And that's what happens. When we're in survival, our body and mind is hijacked. And the purpose of this, it's the opposite of this. This is intentional recovery. This is when the body says you can't cope with these emotions anymore, and what it does is it kind of locks you in. So like a simple definition of depression is when you can only experience one emotion, that it's incredibly toxic, so it kind of shuts you down. So we have these 4 states of emotional energy. Only one is optimal for performance. So how much time do you think you spend in survival zone at work? A lot. What pushes you there? Clients. Clients, managers, demands from outside of work, competing with what you're doing, being tired, there's a whole bunch of things, aren't there? What are the costs associated with being in there? Yeah, so it hits your performance. What else? Yes, because the negative emotions are very contagious. So let me just kind of summarize some of the things. The first thing is, I guess none of you have got calluses on your hands from your work, have you? No, you're paid to solve problems and sustain and form valuable relationships using your neural cortex, the curly bit of your brain. So when you can't think because you're in survival, the impact on you is deeply considerable, isn't it? It's also, when you're lying awake at night at 3 o'clock in the morning, can't sleep because you're still running around with this, conflict that you've been in, the costs are big. We know that negative emotions are incredibly contagious. The impact on teams, if you're looking at your team and you've got 10 people in a good state and one isn't, one's in survival, where do you focus your energies? On the 1 or the 10? And if your client says to you 10 great things about your work and 1 negative thing, what do you focus on? Absolutely. So, it's deeply distorting. If you're in a negative emotional state, but you've got great ideas, what do people remember after your pitch? Your emotional state or your great ideas? Generates politics around us. And it impacts on our health, because our body wasn't designed to be suffused with these stress hormones the whole time. And the final thing is that, our ability to remain open, which we have to be, don't we? We have to really be open in this work. And our ability to remain open is very negative. There was a study done with car executives where they looked at their ability to make judgments. And they recognized that if they had been put into a high negative emotional state by something that happened to them before they came to work, like they had an argument with their daughter for not tidying their bedroom up, their ability to take the guidance and advice of their most trusted advisors went down to virtually zero all day. And they had no awareness between that. Look, I'm sorry, I don't know whether it's because it's a hot day or something, but some of you aren't giving me, full attention. I don't know whether you're distracted or want to be somewhere else, but it feels a bit rude, a bit disappointing. Well, great if you think it's funny, but what do you think? How do you feel? No, I wasn't being serious. Okay, so some of you look devastated there. No, what I was trying to do there was to put you into that emotional state. How did you feel? Awkward. So, how many of you felt guilty? A few of you. All right. So that might suggest you went into flight. How many of you thought, "What an idiot"? We're paying for him. We don't care whether or not he feels anything. It's like. So that might be some of the fight coming out in you. So what I was doing there, and this is a really key thing to understand, is the mechanism that takes us into a high negative emotional state, into the survival zone, is a process called triggering. And triggering happens beyond our conscious awareness. This is something that happens, it hijacks our fight or flight responses without us being aware. And the key to understanding this is so important because what it enables you to do is to improve your emotional recovery, the speed of recovery. Because we will be triggered every day to the day we die. Your nemesis will walk in the room. Your new client comes in, and something about their face just goes, like this, and all of a sudden you're in survival. And all the costs that we talked about, the brilliant you is replaced by the 7-year-old you. Okay, who just either wants to get out of there or he wants to, you want to criticize and find lots of reasons for this person who's got nothing to suggest that this is the case. You just want to bring them down. We've all felt like that, haven't we? So the first thing is to recognize that a trigger is something that consistently provokes this in us. And we tend to react either as a fight person or, to withdraw from the situation. And when we get pushed into this, it's not an all or nothing situation. We might be mildly irritated because somebody keeps on, being late into the meeting, and it just distracts us. But if they keep on doing it and then they ask a really stupid question that's been asked already, we might find our judgment impaired to the point where we get overwhelmed and furious. So it's not an all or nothing mechanism. And what we tend to do is really important to understand. So if you're a fight person, you're feeling anger and judgmental. It's not, it's your fault. Defensive. It's not my fault. And what do? You tend to, to go on the offensive. If you're a flight person, then you're feeling inadequate. You're feeling taken advantage of potentially. And what you want to do fundamentally is get the hell out of there. You want to withdraw, disengage, minimize this situation. And this is beyond personality, by the way, because this is something that's very primitive. So this isn't about introvert, extrovert. And I'm sure you've seen situations where you've got fight and flight people, and you see the dynamic that creates. The flight person is always at disadvantage initially in these situations because by looking at the floor and looking like they're disengaging, that doesn't help them. So, if you want to deal with negative emotions, the first thing to recognize is that we have to manage this intentionally rather than reactively. So how do we do that? Well, the starting point is about awareness. When we're triggered, what you need to be saying to yourself is, aha, I have just been triggered. This is not something necessarily has been done to me, because you could be triggered by something that has nothing to do. You could be walking along the street, see something, it triggers you, can't you? Nobody's trying to do it to you. So recognize this is a process that's going on inside you. Don't leap to, it's been done to me. So the first rule of triggers, the golden rule of triggers, is whatever you feel compelled to do, don't. Okay? Just kind of log that in your brain. It's much easier to say than do, obviously. But recognize that it's a physical transaction that's going on in your body. Your hormones have changed. Your emotional state is now dictating how you see the world. So the first thing you can do is just start to take a deep breath and feel your feet. Ground yourself in the situation. This is only a holding pattern. This is all about trying to buy time, because if you're a fight person, what you're trying to do is to lower your energy in the situation. And if you're a flight person, you're trying to raise it. You're trying to lean forward and go, look the person in the eye and go, I'm here. Because if you don't, you're liable to make it worse. So what's at the root? Well, the root of being triggered, and this is a really fundamental insight, is that when we're triggered, the thing that's under attack most of the time in modern life isn't our physical well-being, it's our sense of value. Okay? Our sense of value. Our fundamental right to feel okay. One minute you're feeling fine, and the next minute I triggered you and you go, oh, I'm not feeling fine. Some of you might have thought, oh, he's playing a trick on us. This doesn't make any sense. It's not logical to go from one state to another. But it doesn't matter what you thought, does it? Your emotional state trumped your thinking state, and it always will. So ask yourself the question, is my value at stake here? Because if it isn't, don't act as if it is. Your value wasn't at stake here, was it, when I triggered you, but you still felt it was. So that's the primary thing when your clients trigger you. So I'm sitting here with this group of advertising managers in this global brand and comms team, and the number of times their agency triggers them. In the session, we looked through the last week's email, and we noticed that something in the group of 20 people, 800 times. And of course, the opposite's going on in the other side of the equation, isn't it? And then when we started to look at what was going on and trying to understand how they felt about it, through the next thing I'm just going to finish off with you, is that actually it didn't make any sense at all half the time. So what's going on? Your subconscious reaction to being triggered and to feeling your value at stake, these behaviors are your subconscious attempt to get your value back. And that's why, when you're triggered, your instinctive, reactive behavior always gets you the opposite of what you want, because none of these things are going to help you, are they, in the long run? These aren't the best of you. This is your 7-year-old self trying to reclaim your sense of value, like a child screaming or crying or trying to please, when in fact they should be doing the opposite. So I'm going to just leave you with 3 really simple ways of reframing a situation when you're triggered. So the first thing that I'm going to get you to do is this idea of lens work. And the 3 lenses here. The reflective lens is simply described as trying to pull apart the facts and the stories in the situation. Human beings are meaning-making animals. We interpret the world not as a series of facts. We make stories up instantaneously. And the stories we tell from being in the survival zone tend to cast us as the victim. I can't do this, I'm not being allowed. Now, your world is all about, not being the victim, about leading, about building confidence. So recognizing what's the story you're telling yourself and how does it make you feel is a really important thing. And the fundamental takeaway from this is that what you should be always trying to figure out in your teams and for yourself and with your clients is the story of realistic optimism. What's the most positive story you can tell about the situation without denying the facts? What's the most positive story you can tell about the situation without denying the facts? And when you build that story, immediately you'll start to feel better, because what you're doing is you're re-engaging your neural cortex, your thinking brain. The half-life of emotions, or negative ones, is long when you're feeling them through, when you're allowing them to metabolize. When you engage your brain, you seize control and you start to reduce that sense of anxiety. That's the first lens, and it's a really good one to practice. The second lens is the reverse lens, and this is trying to simply understand what this situation looks like from the other person's perspective. And the easiest way to do that is ask yourself the question, how does this person's behavior make sense given how they're feeling? How does this person's behavior make sense given how they're feeling? So with this team last week, I got them to look at all their triggers, not through how they were feeling about it, but how they thought their agencies were feeling about it. And what they all came to was they were the people who were triggering their agencies. And the result, the reaction from the agencies were all defense, which was making them, creating a negative feedback loop. So the minute you seize control of that situation and recognize that that's what's going on, does it change your strategy about how you deal with things? Does it stop you getting into defense and attack mode? Typically it does. But you're doing it from a good way. You're not doing it from an inauthentic trying to please. You're doing it from understanding how to hold the other side's value. And the final lens, this is really important when you find yourself locked into a situation that feels like the world is crumbling down on top of your head, and this is the long lens, which is to ask yourself, what will this situation look like in a year's time? How will I have learned and grown through this? And taking those questions to your client in an authoritative and confident manner is really important. And asking yourself, what would the best of me and us look like in this situation, rather than the reactive, defensive, or aggressive side. Now, I know this has been really quick, but hopefully that's given you one or two ideas and kind of thoughts for how to manage your energy more effectively. So I've got a few minutes to take Q&A if anybody wants to ask me any questions. Yeah.
Hello. So I was interested in your thinking about distraction and moving. What are your views on the open plan office?
It's terrible. And it's terrible for lots of reasons, because we went from closed offices to open, which is a kind of span. We believe that you need kind of 6 spaces in offices. Open plan's fine for a period of time, but you need to move, and you need to conscious to be moved. We tend to watch people in offices moving from meeting to their desk, meeting to the desk. Those are the 2 places they span. And of course, whenever they're in a meeting, they're doing meeting stuff, or they're multitasking because they're doing their email as well, or they're at their desk being interrupted on average every 11 minutes. So I would say that what we need is high focus areas. We need places where you can go where it's just, I'm concentrating, and don't talk to me. We need stimulus areas where people can go and get inspired and work in large formats on walls and stuff. We need places where people can flock, and we need places where people can renew and recover. So I think offices just need to be a bit smarter about that. Often it doesn't really mean changing very much. It means the behaviours and the protocols that you adopt around them.
Thank you. What's the one most powerful thing that we could go back to the office and do today?
What's the most powerful thing you could do? Well, the honest thing is to ask yourself, what do you value most in the people around you? The power of positive appreciation is something that we're trying to get companies to recognize, because as we get busier and busier, what we tend to do is lock down on what people produce for us. And the science of intrinsic motivation now is becoming more and more clear that the reason why the best people stay in organizations is because they feel they can make a difference. And the levers for that are autonomy, growth, and a sense of purpose. And managers, what they need to realize, I think, is that rather than trying to lock people down into performance measures and getting them tighter and tighter down in performance management, actually the best way of helping people is to value them more effectively. So you can value people in 2 ways. You can value them what they produce for you, or you can value them for who they are. And it's easy to value somebody who's like you. You're like me, I like me, so I like you. That's easy. But what about those people who are very different? What about the planner who's kind of like got a very different mind to you? What about the advertising creative who's like really different for you? Those people are less easy for you to have that immediate answer, what do I value in them? And when you value in them, when people feel that you value the inherent nature of somebody, then actually that makes a big difference. So I'd make a list of all the people in your world and see whether you know what that is, and kind of try and connect with people at that level. You will make a big difference in your world.
You talked before about recovery in the office, and we don't live in ideal worlds, but if you were to map out an ideal plan, would it be 45 minutes or 90 minutes, 5-minute breaks or 10-minute breaks? What would you try and structure? Okay, good question. So I would say that first is macro, is that we have a week. The energy curve in the week starts off Monday and Friday, not great days, because we're either engaging or disengaging. So Monday, great days for reflective individual work, not good for team. Do not do personal reviews. Do not do anything that requires high levels of confrontation or stress on a Monday. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the best days for creative work, for teamwork, for innovation with clients, all that kind of stuff. And Friday, a good day for disengaging, planning next week, individual work. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that the day follows a similar curve. We rise to a peak at about 11 o'clock, kind of it tails off, it goes into a slump at 3, and then it kind of recovers a little bit and off. So it makes sense to me to do the high focus creative work in the first 3 to 4 hours of the day. And typically most people put that off
until the end of the day, and then it gets short-changed because everything builds up. So one key strategy that we're trying to encourage people to do is called first thing first, is do high-leverage work first before you do anything else. Don't email, don't talk to anybody, don't do anything else. Don't do all the things you feel compelled to do, because our automatic pattern is go into the office, have a coffee, switch on your email, connect, and then, of course, you're hijacked. You're either triggered or you're distracted by someone else's agenda. What if the first hour and a half of every day you did something that was completely under your control? High-value work we don't tend to get to, and then get short-changed over a period of time. So, back to your more granular question, I think you have to mix it up. I think intense meetings or periods of meetings are deeply draining. So what we're encouraging people to do is to consider a variety of things. If you've got deep dives and you need to work for 3 or 4 hours on something, break it up into short periods of time. Make sure nobody speaks for more than 20 minutes on any one subject, because that's about the maximum capacity that we have to concentrate on a subject. So somebody stands up and does a 50-minute presentation, then, that's pretty much it. We're all done, aren't we? If we then move into dialogue and conversation, and nobody's really got the energy to have, lots and lots of creative input into that. So break it up as much as you can, and try and encourage people then to take active renewal, whatever that looks like, going out for a walk, listening to music. The eBay people, are now creating playlists for recovery. What's the best songs, to get recovery, and they go and put their headphones on. And it's become a cultural norm. Sorry, somebody at the back. I'm just conscious there. Put your hand up.
How do you get others to adopt this approach without sounding like a preacher? It's all very well saying, have the 5-minute nap, but then you're the girl who does the 5-minute nap. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit of a culture shift.
Well, this is a difficult one. I think the first thing to do is to recognise that, this isn't about, you shouldn't be trying to become like the evangelist in the first instance, to come back to the office and go, this is how we do things. The first thing to do is to try it out for yourself and get the benefits of it. And, once you've got the benefits of it and people start to see it, then start to spread it. We constantly find that our ideas run up against the cultural norm of the organisation. So in Sony, when we first, and this was a long time ago, 7 or 8 years ago, people were getting recovery by going into the cubicles of the toilet. And that's not good. Deep breathing in a toilet is not a good kind of thing to do. But what it then created, like a tipping point of people who said, actually we need to build recovery rooms. And that's what they did. So I think, my advice is control what you can control, do what you can do, get the benefit of it first. If it makes sense to you, do it. Don't wait for other people to sign off it and be convinced about it. And then, start to talk about the benefits of what you've got, because you're actually doing it. That's more credible. There's not an easy answer, I'm afraid. Somebody down here.
If you have a meeting which you have to perform at, what are the sort of 3 top tips you can give someone to stimulate your performance?
Your performance?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think about this very much, actually, because I do so much of it. It's become kind of automatic for me. But I think the thing that I see most people doing is not preparing enough, because they confuse having written the PowerPoint presentation with knowing what they're going to say. And then they spend most of the time doing this, talking to the PowerPoint screen. I think, actually, start with a story. Always start with the story, because that hooks people in. The most powerful thing about any presentation is that there is something to communicate. It's the most fundamental communicable unit, which is a story. So think about what you're trying to say, and then ask yourself, what's the story that I want people to pass on? What would I like people to use as like the summary for this? And then get yourself into a state, an emotional state, where you're really looking forward to it. Because, again, standing up in front of a group of people can be one of 2 things. You can tell yourself a story, which is everybody's going to hate this, and they're not going to like it. Or, this is going to be great. Positive visualization of it going well. I mean, I probably did this 15 years ago when I was less confident about presenting. I'm not worried at all about it now, because I've practiced it a lot. And getting to the point where you feel so confident about the points that are in your head. I think moving away from support, I mean, I am using PowerPoint, but I could equally do this presentation without it and feel, as comfortable. So I think it's stories and getting to the point of preparation. It's the only answer, really. So that it's in your body as opposed to, something that you have to look at and have as a series of cues.
When you talked about the fight or flight reaction, is there any way to sort of make yourself a middle ground person so that you don't either fight or flight, you don't sort of want to regress or argue with that person in a negative way, you can have a positive reaction to try and get to a good outcome of the problem?
Well, that's what we all want to be, isn't it?
Yeah.
We want to be. All right. So, are you asking the question? Can you not be a fight or flight reaction?
Kind of, yeah.
Well, that's not true. So the thing is that you will be triggered to the day you die. No therapy, counselling, anything is ever going to eradicate the source of triggers, because where they're formed are in the early stages of your life. So the first 1 to 7 years, and particularly the first 4 years. And there's this kind of phenomenon called childhood amnesia, where you don't remember much before 4, do you? You may have a few glimpses, but nobody remembers their third birthday in any detail, do they? And that's because the hippocampus, the part of your brain that's responsible for long-term memory, doesn't get formed fully. We've only known that recently. And you don't have coping strategies for emotional trauma at that age, do you? So what happens to you when you first go to nursery and you think all children are wonderful, assuming you haven't been bullied by an elder sibling, and you walk in and then some little brat comes up to you and goes like that. That's you haven't got any coping strategies for it. Or you're in the supermarket and you've been joined at the hip with your mother for several years, and then you turn around, she's gone. She's in the next aisle, but you have 45 seconds of running around like you're going to die. Those are traumas, little scars on your emotional psyche, and then you go to school and you learn at university and at coping strategy after coping strategy, and they're just like build layer upon layer of things that help you. But you don't remember those emotional scars, but they're there, and then they get triggered, and that's what puts you into fight or flight. So the question isn't can you eradicate them, the question is can you increase your speed of recovery by recognizing A, they've happened, and B, this is where I'm likely to go, and C, the way of metabolizing those more rapidly is to start interpreting them differently by telling different stories around them, using the lens work to process them more quickly. So it's a fitness issue rather than can you eradicate. Can I be always Switzerland? No, you can't. And actually, you're more likely to, when you think you can, more likely to actually be governed by them. And I've got to go, haven't I? All right, thank you.
I think that's a great point to end. That's a really good point to end on, because I think the world around us isn't going to change, our clients aren't going to change, but actually there's lots of meat there to take away and help us manage ourselves and our reactions to that very differently. And I think, like all of the best of these sessions, there's things we can take away and try out today. So thank you for coming this morning, and thank you again to Jean for a brilliant session.
Hello, I'm Chris Spenceley from TBWA.
What's your top tip for today?
I think it's stuff that we know, but make the time to do the recovery. Make the time to have the lunch. Don't eat lunch at your desk. Take 5-10 minutes out when you've had a long meeting. Simple stuff that we all know, but will make a big difference, I think, and I'm going to start doing it today.
I'm Ryan from Grey, account manager. My top tip that I've learnt from today is to be less distracted. I think I need to take a step back and sort of appreciate my approach to work a little bit more. Take a bit more of a strategic approach to it, and make sure that I'm not distracted by emails first thing in the morning, and make sure that I generally sort of refocus my energy levels into more important strategic things.
Lisa from Generation Media. I think the biggest thing I took out of today was probably thinking about the fight or flight and how different characters fit into one of the two boxes, and recognising how people deal with things in a different way and approaching that when there's conflict.